But this is what gets to the issue of, will this really lead to the end of the war? And my answer is yes. This agreement became possible now because of what I call the Trump effect. It's very difficult for Bibi Netanyahu to say no to President-elect, soon-to-be President Trump. I don't believe the Biden administration would have been able to close on this without the threats that were coming, the demands that were coming from Trump.
The dateline is like, this is going to start on Sunday. What could happen? What could happen to make this start on Sunday? And what are the odds that the cabinet will approve this?
I think the odds the cabinet will approve it are extremely high. But I think we have to recognize there are three monitors and guarantors to this agreement. It's Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. This agreement became possible now because of what I call the Trump effect. It's very difficult for Bibi Netanyahu to say no to President-elect, soon-to-be President Trump. He fears the consequences of saying no to him, all sorts of needs that the Israelis will still have. He finds it difficult to say no to him, and he knows the Israeli public looks at Trump as being fundamentally favorable towards Israel. So he will explain this agreement in terms of President Trump insists on it, number one. But this is what gets to the issue of, will this really lead to the end of the war? And my answer is yes, it will, because the US, meaning the Trump administration, because they own this agreement. You saw the credit that President Trump took today. He called this an epic agreement. So
Absolutely.
they're now a guarantor that will be implemented. And if Bibi finds it hard to say no to him to do the deal, I think he will also find no to him not to carry it out. The only way this doesn't happen is if Hamas decides to violate the terms of the agreement. That could happen, but I don't think it's in Hamas's interest to violate the terms of the agreement.
Yeah, Donald Trump was taking credit for this and saying that's because he's coming into office, and there's a sense that that Hamas knows that he's willing to drop the hammer and side almost wholly with Israel in what it should choose to do. But all of the negotiations preceding it were Biden administration negotiations, which presumably were subtler. There are things like conditions that three hostages will be released within 48 to 72 hours of the agreement, along with unknown numbers of Palestinian prisoners. Are you concerned that because this took so long to take shape and there's so many subtleties and nuance, that that will be lost in the new administration and whatever shifts in the agreement it might choose to pursue?
Well, it's a very good question, because this is actually a very long agreement. It may be 100 pages in length. So obviously there's not just a lot of detail, there's a lot of subtlety built into it. Egypt and Qatar couldn't put pressure on Hamas. And by the way, what moved Hamas in the end were two things. One was they were isolated. They no longer had Hezbollah. The Assad regime was gone. The Iranians have been dramatically weakened. The whole ring of fire around Israel, the axis of resistance, basically has been transformed, if not eliminated. And so they were alone. But that also made them more vulnerable to pressure from Qatar and Egypt, both of whom wanted to prove to President Trump that they would get things done for him, because he made it clear he wanted this done before he was inaugurated. So the Trump effect was an effect on Prime Minister Netanyahu, but also on the other two mediators.
So there are a lot of good questions, interesting questions. Daniel has this one for you, Mr. Ambassador. There are multiple messages from sources like Fox that the ceasefire and hostage exchange were negotiated mainly by the Trump team in a few days rather than the current administration since May. What do you make of that?
Well, look, I live in the world of facts, not alternative facts. There's a 100-page document. That 100-page document was not negotiated in the last couple of days. What is fair to say is that I don't believe the Biden administration would have been able to close on this without the threats that were coming, the demands that were coming from Trump. Get this over with. I think, as I said, that had an impact on Prime Minister Netanyahu. I think it also had an impact on the Egyptian and Qatari mediators. It is fair to say the Trump effect helped to conclude this, But the details which we were talking about before, all the details were negotiated in advance. The essence of this was basically negotiated by the Biden team. The Steve Witkoff came in and he was fully briefed by Brett McGurk. He went to Qatar. He sat in on the negotiations, but all this was basically all the terms were negotiated previously. Surely their presence, the Trump presence, the Trump effect, helped to conclude it.